that does not need to be typically cited. So for example, kangaroos are only found in Australia. That's a piece of information that is general knowledge, generally known and understood by people. QUT has a blue logo. That's just a fact. Penguins are black and white. Fact, right? They're things that are common information that does not need to be cited. But when we're talking about newly acquired information, this might mean things that we maybe learn in a lecture, or terms that we hadn't heard of before that we find a definition for, or pieces of writing that we come to understand by reading them through a reading that is being prescribed by your teacher. So newly acquired information. What do we mean by newly acquired information? It could be any of these things. So it could be a reading that you're doing. It could be a piece of information that you've read from the library. It could be something that your teacher has said or that has featured on your teacher's slides, perhaps. But you need to just remember honesty and professionalism, respect, fairness, and responsibility when undertaking academic activities. And if in doubt, if you're not sure, there are multiple things you can do. One thing you can do if you're not sure is to ask your teacher, okay? So you can say, I found this piece of information. Here's how I'm trying to embed it in my assignment. Is this correct, or is this academic misconduct? Right, that's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is, if in doubt, if something is very difficult to paraphrase, and we'll talk about paraphrasing in a moment, that's rewriting the idea in your own words. Something is very difficult to paraphrase, or you're not quite sure if you've got it right, sometimes you might just leave the original quote, you put double quotation marks and a citation, an in-text citation. That's another way of avoiding academic integrity issues. But your teachers typically give you the opportunity for a draft, in which case you can ask these sorts of questions. I think try to be brave enough to ask questions of your teacher. If you can't ask them in front of everybody, then I would suggest sending an email and asking the question, or waiting until the end of class. Usually your teachers will leave 10 minutes at the end of class time for questions, or you can request a one-on-one meeting, consultation with your teacher. These are not silly questions, okay? These are questions that might in fact save you from ending up in trouble with academic misconduct or doing something incorrectly in the future. So we looked briefly last week. I showed you in the module the link to the Student Code of Conduct, and I will refresh your memory on this because it is in here if you want to go back and have another look. So if you're in our module and we're scrolling down, there is a link here to the Student Code of Conduct, which is our expectations of you in a classroom and at QUT, how a virtual classroom or a face-to-face classroom, how we expect that you will act and interact with others. So I would suggest that you go and have a look. It's quite long, so we're not going to go through all of it now, but I have pulled out some of the really important parts for our session today. And the important parts for our session today, as they relate to academic misconduct, is that QUT is committed to maintaining high academic and professional standards and expects that students will undertake academic work and assessment in a manner which is fair, honest, and accountable. When we say fair, we mean working within the rules and not blaming others for our actions. When we say honest, we mean being truthful. And when we say accountable, we mean being able to explain. Okay? So fair, honest, and accountable. One of the ways that this accountable usually comes up is if your teacher reads something and they think, that doesn't sound like my student. You have to remember that we get to know you and the way that you write and work pretty closely. We spend a lot of time with you in a week. Sometimes if we read something and we think, well, that doesn't really sound like my student, if you're using those principles of being accountable, your teacher might ask you for your draft work. They might ask you for, what did you do in the lead up to this? Could you show me your notes? okay? Maybe it is that you have just improved that much by doing the classwork, and that's awesome. And if you're being accountable and you're just showing your teacher, here's how I got to this answer, and your teacher can see and understand how you got to that answer, then that's fine. But if your teacher can't see, if you say, oh, I didn't write a draft, or I can't show you any of the evidence of my work, that becomes a problem, right? Because you should be able to. You should have drafts. You should have some notes. Maybe you've got some readings with some highlights. You should be able to talk about what your assignment was about. You should be able to talk about the approach that you took for your assignment. If it's something that involves mathematics, you should be able to say how you got to your answer. If it's something that involves maybe photography, I know some students in creative industries are doing photography. You should be able to show some other images that you made at the same time that you were making that one. So you should hang on to all of the work that you're doing, okay, in order for you to be able to show your teacher how you got to that end result, should your teacher have questions about it. And I've had this happen before in the past with work. I've seen work and gone, wow, this is really good and it's great, and I really hope the student has actually improved this much. And I've sent an email and the student has come back and said, yeah, here's everything that I did. And I've been able to see exactly how hard they've worked in order to get that result. It won't happen with every piece of assessment, but your teachers do know you quite well. QUT has a really strong academic integrity policy, and we do this to protect QUT's reputation, but also so that that piece of paper that you get means something, right? QUT is a really world-renowned study institution. It has pretty good reviews. We do take the real-world learning very seriously. So we do maintain really high standards with academic integrity, because we don't just want people to get through with QUT without doing the work themselves. So we have this academic integrity policy which defines QUT's stance on what is fair and honest behaviour when completing assessment at university. And these kinds of activities, and there are kinds of activities that may get you into trouble. And since we realise that sometimes policy language needs further explanation, the checklist helps you to stay on the right path, as there are significant risks associated with any form of assessment-related cheating. So these include study-related risks such as loss of marks or unit failure, or in the worst case, depending on how bad it is, exclusion from QUT entirely. So the university can choose to not allow you to study anymore. Professional or career-related risks, as employees realise gaps in your understanding or performance. So if you haven't done the work yourself and you go out into the industry and then they quickly realise that you didn't learn anything at university, because part of you doing these assignments is so that you learn. Threats to the public because of a lack of competence, important knowledge and skills. Personal and financial risks, such as when commercial assessment services or contract cheating providers subject you to ongoing blackmail potentially, financial fraud, and identity theft. So remember that these are not trustworthy entities. So we've had this happen in the past where some students have purchased work and then have been blackmailed or asked for more money so they didn't get in trouble, or have stolen students' login details and other pieces of assessment and redistributed them to other students. So just remember, like, they're not particularly trustworthy entities. If you're having problems, the best thing to do is to come to your teacher and ask questions. They will help you. All of your teachers are really, especially at the college, are really interested in your success. So as long as you're working and you're doing the right thing, your teachers will do the right thing by you. So what does QUT consider to be dishonest and evidence of misconduct? So these are some things. So cheating in exams. This includes any action or attempted action where you might gain an unfair advantage in an examination. So common methods of cheating include bringing unauthorized material into an exam, having access to unauthorized written notes during the exam, communicating with others during the exam, copying or reading another student's work during the exam. These things are not okay in an examination. Some exams, your teacher might allow you to bring notes. Sometimes we have an exam called an open book exam, and the teacher will say you are allowed to bring the textbook to this exam, or you're allowed to bring some notes to this exam. It's your responsibility as a student to make sure that you know what you can and cannot bring into an exam. So they're the sorts of questions leading up to exams that you need to be asking your teachers. And we'll refresh this when we get closer to exam period because it's worth just a reminder. So that's cheating in exams. And then we have plagiarism. Plagiarism. So plagiarism involves the representing of another person's ideas or work as your own. So this is really specific mostly to assessment. So it may include resubmitting your own work for another assessment. You can't do that. QUT has what we call a double submission policy. So if you get awarded a grade for a piece of work over here in one assessment, you cannot then submit it to another assignment that you maybe have 2 years later that has similar topic area. You can't do that. That's actually academic misconduct. Common forms of plagiarism include direct copying, summarizing, or paraphrasing another person's work without an appropriate acknowledgement of the source or sources, representing the work of another person's as your own, copying non-word-based materials such as diagrams, plans, audio-visual materials, and presenting them as your own work, using another person's experimental results, if you're in science, as your own without proper or appropriate acknowledgement. So these are really common examples of plagiarism. I'm going to quickly show you 4 examples, and I've got an activity that I'm going to get you into breakout groups to do. So let me quickly just show you these 4 examples and then explain the activity to you. So we've got this example, we've got this example, we've got a video example, and we also have this one. So there's 4 different examples. There's a text-based example, there's one to think about, which is an image, there's this one to think about also, and there's a video. So I don't need you to tell me anything at this point, and I'm not going to talk too much about them because I have an activity for your groups to do in just a moment. So in our module, so if you go to opening the first module, and I will share screen on this content. I'm going to put you into breakout groups in just a moment. And in our module, you should see just under the academic integrity session, there is a class Padlet. And I'm going to randomly allocate you to different breakout groups. And different breakout groups are going to be dealing with different examples. So if you're in group 1, 2, or 3, you're going to look at the first example. If you're in group 4, 5, or 6, you're going to look at the second example. If you're in group 7 or 8, you're going to look at the third example. And if you're in groups 9 and 10, you're going to look at the video example, and I will pop the link for the video in the chat so that you can have a look. What I want for your group to do is over here on the left-hand side, the activity instructions. So this is an opportunity for your group to consider the examples that you have been given in relation to plagiarism. Your group will need to decide if this is an example of plagiarism, and if so, what type of plagiarism is it, using this list, which is from the slides, but I've also copied it here. Then the group should also justify using 50 to 100 words how they think that this example doesn't or does show plagiarism. And I want you to just make one response per group, And then I want for you to post it underneath the corresponding example. So if you're group 1, 2, or 3, you'll add the plus button under your example to add your 50 to 100 words justifying why you think or do not think that this is an example of plagiarism. Same with groups 4, 5, and 6. We'll post here. Groups 7 and 8 will post here, and groups 9 and 10 will post here. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. And if you have any questions, you can ask me, or if you're having a really good discussion in your group and you're not sure what the correct answer is, you can also ask me. But I think this will be a really great activity. And then when we come back together, I'm going to ask for volunteers, a volunteer from each group, to talk a little bit about what they thought and why they thought this. So have in the back of your mind that I would like for your group to allocate somebody who is willing to speak with minimum their microphone on. The best version of this would be with your camera and microphone on. So you also have a little bit of time to brush your hair while you're in this breakout group if you need to, if you've just woken up, and you don't want to put your camera on. So this will be an opportunity for you to be talking about plagiarism and the different examples that you have there. All right. So activity instructions are on the left. I will also put the link for the Padlet. You can access it through the module, but I'll also copy the link here and I'm going to drop it in the chat so that if you can't access the module for some reason, you have the link with the instructions. Okay, can I get a thumbs up in the chat if we understand what it is we have to do? A thumbs down if it's really not clear, and any questions if you have them. Okay, so for group 9 and 10, once I send you, I'll also add the link that you have to watch for your video in the chat. The rest are not videos, they're just images. Okay, let me make your breakout groups. How many of you are there?